The snow was falling heavily that night on the winding mountain roads of Colorado. Alexander Sterling gripped his steering wheel tightly, squinting through the windshield as his luxury car crawled along the icy path. He shouldn't have taken this shortcut from his tech company's satellite office, but he was exhausted after back-to-back meetings and wanted to reach his mountain estate quickly. His phone buzzed again, probably another message from his sister about the upcoming board meeting. Alex ignored it, focusing on the treacherous road ahead. The heated seats and soft classical music playing through his car's premium speakers couldn't ease the tension in his shoulders. Being a 35-year-old billionaire meant everyone wanted a piece of his time, his money, or both. Dr. Maya Washington was driving home from her last day at Pine Ridge Hospital, her resignation letter still fresh in her mind. After years of subtle discrimination and being passed over for chief of surgery, despite her outstanding record, she'd finally had enough. Her car's trunk was filled with personal items from her office, each box representing years of dedication that somehow wasn't enough to break through the hospital's glass ceiling. The universe has a funny way of bringing people together. As Alex's car hit a patch of black ice around a sharp bend, time seemed to slow down. His vehicle spun out of control, crashing through the guardrail. The last thing he saw was the dark valley below as his car tumbled down the slope. Maya was about half a mile behind when she noticed the broken guardrail and fresh tire tracks in the snow. Without hesitation, she pulled over and grabbed her emergency medical kit, a habit she never broke even on her last day. Using her phone's flashlight, she carefully made her way down the steep slope, her heart pounding when she spotted the overturned luxury car. "Hello, can you hear me?" she called out, approaching the wreck. Through the shattered window, she could see a man hanging upside down, still strapped in his seatbelt, blood trickling from a head wound. Her training kicked in immediately. Getting him out wasn't easy. The car door was jammed, and Maya had to break the window further to reach him. She worked methodically, checking his vitals, stabilizing his neck, and carefully extracting him from the wreckage. Her hands moved with practiced precision despite the biting cold and the challenge of working alone. "Stay with me," she kept saying, her breath visible in the freezing air. "I'm Dr. Washington, and I'm going to help you." She noticed his expensive watch and custom suit, but focused solely on keeping him alive. In that moment, he wasn't a billionaire, he was simply her patient. When Alex regained consciousness briefly, he was confused by the gentle but firm hands treating his wounds. Through his blurry vision, he saw a woman working with incredible focus, her dark skin contrasting with the falling snow, her movements confident and precise. He tried to speak but could only manage a weak groan. "Don't try to talk," Maya instructed, applying pressure to stop his bleeding. "Help is coming." She'd already called emergency services, but in these mountains, response times could be dangerously long. For the next 40 minutes, Maya fought to keep him stable. She used supplies from her medical kit and even her own coat to keep him warm. When the ambulance finally arrived, the paramedics were amazed by her expert care. "You probably saved his life," one of them told her. As they loaded Alex into the ambulance, Maya handed them his wallet and phone she'd recovered from the car. She was about to leave when his hand suddenly caught her wrist. "Name," he whispered, his eyes focusing on her for the first time. "Please." "Dr. Maya Washington," she said, surprised by the intensity of his gaze despite his condition. "You're going to be fine." A week later, Maya was unpacking boxes in her apartment when her phone rang. The caller introduced himself as Alexander Sterling's personal assistant. "Mr. Sterling would like to thank you personally for saving his life," the voice said. "He's requesting that you oversee his recovery at his private estate." Maya's first instinct was to decline. She'd just left one uncomfortable workplace situation. Why walk into another? But something about that night on the mountain, about the way he'd looked at her, made her hesitate. "Dr. Washington," a weak but determined voice came on the line, Sterling himself. "Please, I trust you with my life. I already did once." That call would change everything. Neither of them knew it yet, but that snowy night was just the beginning of a story that would challenge them both, break down walls, and prove that sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead us to the best ones. Looking back, Maya would always remember how the snowflakes looked in her flashlight beam as she climbed down that slope. She hadn't known she was walking toward her destiny. She was just doing what she'd always done, helping someone in need, regardless of who they were. And Alex would never forget the determination in her eyes as she fought to save him, the one person who saw him as just another human being who needed help. The Sterling estate sprawled across 30 acres of pristine mountain property, but to Maya, it felt more like a beautiful prison. She'd been here for 3 weeks now, overseeing Alex's recovery, and every day brought new challenges that had nothing to do with medicine. "Your brother's physical therapy session is in 10 minutes, Victoria Sterling announced one morning, not bothering to look at Maya as she swept into Alex's private medical suite. Her designer heels clicked against the marble floor, each step somehow feeling like a judgment. Maya continued checking Alex's vital signs, maintaining her professional composure. "Actually, we've adjusted his schedule. The morning sessions were putting too much strain on his healing ribs." Victoria's perfectly manicured hand paused on her phone. "And who authorized this change?" "I did." Alex spoke up from his bed, his voice stronger now but still carrying the weight of his injuries. "Maya's my doctor, Victoria. That's why she's here." The tension in the room could have been cut with a knife. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes as she left, her phone already at her ear, no doubt calling someone on the hospital board about this latest incident. Later that afternoon, Maya accompanied Alex to his specialist appointment at the city's most prestigious hospital. She noticed the subtle changes in how people treated her the moment they walked through the doors. The same doctors who had dismissed her research proposals now smiled nervously, their eyes darting between her and Alex. "Dr. Chen," Maya addressed the neurosurgeon professionally, "I'm concerned about the pressure buildup shown in Mr. Sterling's latest scan." She pointed to specific areas on the brain imaging displayed on the screen. The specialist barely glanced at her notes. "I assure you, everything is proceeding normally." "Show me," Alex interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. "Dr. Washington's concerns are my concerns. Please explain why you disagree with her assessment." The room fell silent. Dr. Chen's face flushed as he took a closer look at the scan. 20 minutes later, he was adjusting Alex's treatment plan based on Maya's observations. On the drive back to the estate, Alex was unusually quiet. "Does this happen often?" he finally asked. Maya kept her eyes on the road. "Being dismissed? Let's just say I didn't resign from Pine Ridge because I got tired of winning." That evening, James Marshall, Alex's best friend and business partner, paid a visit. Maya was reviewing patient notes in the estate's library when she overheard their conversation through the partially open door. "Alex, buddy, you need to think about the company's image," James was saying. "The board is worried. Having an unknown doctor living in your house, making medical decisions, people are talking." "She saved my life, James." "Yes, and we're all grateful. But surely one of our hospital's chief surgeons called." "You mean one of the same surgeons who missed what she caught today?" Alex's voice had an edge to it. "Did Victoria put you up to this?" Maya quietly gathered her things and slipped out through the library's second door. She was used to this kind of resistance, but it didn't make it hurt any less. The next morning, she found Alex attempting to walk to his home office without assistance. "That's not part of your recovery plan," she said, quickly moving to support him. "Neither is hiding in the library when James visits," he countered, accepting her help despite his frustration. Maya felt her face warm. "I didn't want to cause more problems." "You know what the real problem is." Alex stopped, turning to face her. "Everyone's so busy protecting their position, their image, their precious status quo that they can't see what really matters. I'm alive because you saw me as a person, not a position." Something changed in their dynamic that morning. When Alex insisted Maya join him for his video conference with the company's medical technology division, she realized he wasn't just fighting for his recovery, he was fighting for something bigger. The whispers and resistance grew stronger. Victoria hosted dinner parties at the estate without inviting Maya. James sent subtle warnings about stock prices and investor confidence. But for every slight, Alex found a way to demonstrate his trust in Maya's judgment. One night, Maya found a thick folder on her desk. Inside was her research proposal, the same one Pine Ridge had rejected 3 times. On top was a note in Alex's handwriting. "The Sterling Foundation would be honored to fund this. No strings attached. Your brilliance deserves to be seen." She sat there for a long time, holding the folder, thinking about all the barriers she'd faced in her career. For the first time in years, one of those barriers had cracked. But as Maya looked out the window at the gathering storm clouds, she couldn't shake the feeling that the biggest challenges still lay ahead. What neither of them realized was that their story was becoming something larger than themselves. In the coming weeks, every decision they made would ripple outward, challenging not just prejudices, but the very foundations of power and privilege that had long gone unquestioned in their world. Spring arrived at the Sterling estate, bringing with it unexpected changes. The gardens burst into bloom, and Alex's recovery had progressed remarkably. Maya found him one morning in the garden, walking without assistance, a sight that filled her with both professional pride and something deeper she wasn't ready to name. "Your gait is nearly perfect," she said, approaching him on the stone path, "though you shouldn't be out here alone yet." Alex turned, smiling in that way that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "I had a feeling you'd find me. You always do." He held up his phone. "Besides, I wanted to show you something." Maya moved closer to see his screen. It was an email confirming the approval of her research grant. The Sterling Foundation had not only funded her project, but had provided a state-of-the-art facility for her team. "Alex, this is," she started, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the support. "Don't thank me," he interrupted gently. "This is all you. I just removed the roadblocks that should never have been there in the first place." Their eyes met, and the morning air seemed to grow warmer. Over the past months, their relationship had shifted in subtle ways. Late-night discussions about medical research had turned into conversations about their hopes and fears. Professional respect had bloomed into deep admiration. "The facility opens next week," Alex said, his voice softer. "Would you accompany me to the opening gala?" Maya's heart skipped a beat. They both knew this would be more than a professional appearance. "Are you sure? The media will be there." "I've never been more sure of anything," he replied, taking her hand. The gala was a glittering affair, but not everyone was celebrating. Maya overheard snippets of whispered conversations that stopped when she walked by. She felt the weight of stares as Alex kept her by his side throughout the evening, proudly introducing her as both the research director and his date. The next morning, their photos were everywhere. Tech Billionaire's new love screamed one headline. Sterling's beautiful doctor declared another. Maya's phone buzzed constantly with messages from old colleagues, some congratulatory, others thinly veiling their judgment. "Don't read the comments," Alex advised, bringing her coffee in her new office at the research facility. "Trust me on this one." But it wasn't the public scrutiny that worried Maya most. It was the increasing pressure from within Alex's circle. Victoria had stopped trying to hide her disapproval, and James Marshall's friendly facade had developed a noticeable crack. One evening, as they shared a quiet dinner in the estate's kitchen, Maya had insisted on cooking despite the house staff's protests. Alex received an urgent call. The board was questioning his recent decisions, particularly the substantial funding allocated to Maya's research. "They're trying to paint this as a conflict of interest," he said after hanging up, his frustration evident. "As if saving lives through innovative medical research isn't literally in our company's mission statement." Maya set down her fork. "Maybe we should take a step back. I don't want to compromise everything you've built." Alex reached across the table, taking her hand. "Do you know what I've learned since the accident? Sometimes we build things that look impressive but don't actually matter. What you're doing, your research, your dedication to helping others, that matters." Their tender moment was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass. They turned to find Victoria standing in the doorway, a shattered wine glass at her feet. Her face was pale with anger. "How touching," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Tell me, Dr. Washington, was this your plan all along? Save the billionaire, steal his heart, gain access to his fortune." "That's enough, Victoria," Alex warned, standing up. But Maya placed a calming hand on his arm. "No, let her speak." "I faced worse than implied accusations over dinner." Victoria's composure cracked slightly at Maya's calm response. "This isn't just about you two. There are shareholders to consider, family legacies at stake." "You're right," Maya replied, standing as well. "This is bigger than us. It's about breaking down barriers that should have fallen long ago. Your brother almost died because people like you were more concerned with legacies than lives." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria left without another word, but they all knew this was far from over. Later that night, as they walked in the moonlit garden, Alex pulled Maya close. "I'm sorry about Victoria." "About all of it." Maya looked up at the stars, thinking about how far they'd both come. "You know what's strange? For the first time in my career, I'm not fighting these battles alone." "You'll never have to again," Alex promised, and when he kissed her, it felt like a new beginning. Neither of them noticed James Marshall watching from his car parked outside the estate gates, his face illuminated by the glow of his phone as he typed out a message. "It's worse than we thought. Time to move to phase 2. The challenges they'd faced so far were just the beginning. But in that moment, under the spring stars, they had something powerful on their side. A love that had grown not despite their differences, but because of them. The truth has a way of surfacing at the most unexpected moments. For Alex and Maya, it came on a quiet Sunday morning over coffee and financial reports. Alex had been reviewing company documents, something he'd gotten into the habit of doing since his accident made him more cautious about details. "These numbers don't add up," he muttered, spreading papers across the kitchen counter. Maya watched as his face grew increasingly troubled. "The development fund is showing irregularities going back months before my accident." Maya set down her coffee cup. "What kind of irregularities?" Before Alex could answer, his phone buzzed with an urgent message from his security team. There had been a break-in at Maya's research facility overnight. The labs were ransacked, crucial data stolen and equipment destroyed. They rushed to the facility, arriving to find shattered glass and overturned equipment. Maya's hands shook as she surveyed the damage. Years of research, countless hours of work, all compromised. But something felt off about the destruction. "This wasn't random vandalism," Alex said, examining the scene. "They knew exactly where to look, which service to target." His voice hardened. "This was professional." Back at the estate, Alex dove deeper into the company records. Maya stayed by his side, helping him piece together a puzzle that became more disturbing with each discovery. Large sums of money had been systematically diverted through a complex web of fake projects and shell companies. "Look at these dates," Maya pointed out. "The largest transfer happened the day before your accident." She paused, a horrible realization dawning. "Alex, what if your accident wasn't really an accident?" The security footage from that night had been mysteriously corrupted, but Alex's team managed to recover fragments. What they found sent chills down their spines. A black SUV had been following Alex's car that night, keeping its distance until they reached the mountain road. "I know that vehicle," Alex said quietly. "It's the one James uses for business trips." Maya touched his arm gently. "Are you sure? He's your best friend." "Was my best friend," Alex corrected, his voice thick with betrayal. He pulled up more files on his laptop. "Look at this. James has been meeting privately with our competitors. And these emails." He stopped, his face paling. "Victoria's name is all over these correspondences." The pieces fell into place like a cruel puzzle. James had been embezzling funds, and Victoria had known about it. The accident was meant to silence Alex before he could discover the truth. They hadn't counted on Maya being there to save him. That evening, as they sat in Alex's study processing everything, Maya's phone lit up with notifications. Anonymous sources had leaked stories to the press questioning her medical credentials and suggesting she had manipulated her research data. "They're trying to discredit you," Alex said, rage building in his voice. "They know your research facility could bring attention to the company's finances, so they're attacking your reputation first." Maya stood by the window, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. "I've faced discrimination and doubt my entire career, but this?" She turned to Alex. "This isn't just about me anymore, is it?" "No," Alex replied, standing to join her. "This is about power and greed, and what people will do to protect both." He took her hand. "But they made one crucial mistake." "What's that?" "They underestimated us both. They thought the accident would silence me, and their attacks would make you run." He squeezed her hand. "They don't understand that what doesn't break us makes us stronger." A soft knock interrupted them. Alex's most trusted security advisor entered with a thick folder. "Sir, we found something. The break-in at the lab, we recovered partial security footage. You need to see this." The video showed a familiar figure entering the lab using Victoria's security clearance. James Marshall moved through the facility with purpose, directing a team of professionals in the destruction. "There's more," the advisor said hesitantly. "We traced the source of the fake news stories about Dr. Washington. They're coming from a PR firm on Victoria's payroll." Maya watched as Alex's face hardened with determination. "Enough is enough," he said. "It's time to fight back." What they didn't know was that at that very moment, Victoria was meeting with James in a private club downtown. "They know," James said, his usual confidence cracking. "We need to move forward with the final plan." Victoria swirled her wine glass thoughtfully. "My brother always did have a weakness for lost causes. Let's show him exactly what happens when he chooses the wrong side." Back at the estate, Alex and Maya worked late into the night, gathering evidence and planning their next moves. They knew they weren't just fighting for themselves anymore. They were fighting for truth, justice, and the chance to prove that love could triumph over greed and prejudice. "Whatever happens," Maya said as they finally headed to bed, "we face it together." Alex kissed her forehead gently. "Together, that's what they're afraid of most." The night settled over the estate, but the real storm was just beginning. In the days to come, they would learn that some battles change not just the fighters, but the very ground they fight on. The old library at the Sterling estate held more than just books. As Alex and Maya dug deeper into the company's history, they discovered a hidden safe behind a dusty painting. Inside were documents that would change everything they thought they knew about both their families. "These are the original board meeting minutes from 30 years ago," Alex said, carefully spreading yellowed papers across the antique desk. His father's signature was at the bottom of each page, along with names he recognized from his childhood, including Maya's father's name. Maya picked up one of the documents, her hands trembling slightly. "Dr. David Washington. My father worked for Sterling Medical." She'd been too young when he died to know much about his career, only that he'd faced professional difficulties before his passing. Alex read through more papers, his face growing darker. "According to these records, your father was developing an innovative treatment program. He wanted to open clinics in underserved communities." He paused, swallowing hard. "My father blocked it." "Not just blocked it, he had your father removed from his position entirely." The weight of history settled around them like dust in the old library. Maya sank into a leather chair, memories of her childhood rushing back. "I remember him coming home late at night, arguing with my mother about standing up for what's right. He was always talking about making healthcare accessible to everyone." Alex continued reading, each page revealing more of their shared past. His father had systematically prevented diversity initiatives, buried innovative programs that might have helped thousands, all in the name of maintaining the company's traditional image. "That's why Victoria is the way she is," Alex realized aloud. "Our grandfather groomed her from childhood to protect the family legacy. She probably doesn't even realize how deeply these prejudices are ingrained." Maya stood and walked to the window, watching rain begin to fall outside. "My father died thinking he was a failure. The medical board revoked his license based on false accusations." She turned back to Alex. "Your father's name is on the complaint that started the investigation." Alex reached for her hand, but Maya needed space to process this revelation. She moved to examine the old family photographs lining the library walls. Generations of Sterlings stared back at her, their proud poses and formal attire speaking of privilege and power. "You know what's ironic?" she said softly. "The treatment program my father developed, it's not so different from what we're working on now at the research facility." She picked up another document, this one newer. "Look at these dates. The attack on our lab happened exactly 30 years after my father was forced out." A knock at the library door interrupted them. One of Alex's security team entered with an urgent update. "Sir, we've found something in Mr. Marshall's private records. It seems Victoria has been sharing confidential company information with him for years, using a private email server." "The same pattern," Alex muttered, connecting the dots. "My father used James's father to do his dirty work too. It's all here in the records." He turned to Maya. "They're not just fighting us. They're fighting against change itself, trying to maintain a system that should have died out generations ago." Maya's phone buzzed with a news alert. Someone had leaked old photos of her father to the press, along with selective quotes from his disciplinary hearings. The story painted him as incompetent and unethical. "They're trying to use my father's story against us," Maya said, her voice steady despite the pain. "They don't realize they're just proving how deep this problem goes." Alex moved to the old desk where his father used to work, his expression hardening with resolve. "Maya, I need to show you something else." He pulled out a small key from his wallet and opened a drawer that hadn't been touched in years. Inside was a letter, written by his father in his final days. As Alex read it aloud, his voice cracked with emotion. His father had expressed regret for his actions, for the lives he'd damaged in the name of protecting wealth and status. He'd been too proud to make things right while he was alive, but he'd left instructions for Alex to find these documents. He knew, Alex said quietly. He knew someday someone would need to break this cycle. He looked at Maya with tears in his eyes. "Maybe that's why you and I found each other. Maybe some wrongs are meant to be righted by the next generation." They worked through the night, organizing the evidence that would expose decades of discrimination and corruption. But this wasn't just about revealing the past, it was about changing the future. "Your father was ahead of his time," Alex said as dawn broke over the mountains. "And now you're finishing what he started." Maya touched the old photograph of her father she found in the records. He was young, smiling, full of hope for the changes he wanted to make. "We're both breaking free from our family's past," she said, "but we're also honoring the best parts of their dreams." As they prepared to face whatever challenges the day would bring, they understood that some battles are fought not just for ourselves, but for those who came before us and those who will come after. The truth about both their families had been buried for too long. Now it was time for healing to begin. The morning of the emergency board meeting dawned bright and clear, but storm clouds were gathering over the Sterling Tower. Alex straightened his tie in the elevator's mirrored walls, Maya standing strong beside him. They'd spent weeks preparing for this moment. "Are you ready?" she asked, touching his arm gently. "Ready to change everything my family built?" He managed a small smile. "As ready as I'll ever be." The boardroom fell silent as they entered. Victoria sat at their father's old seat, James Marshall beside her. The other board members shifted uncomfortably, already aware that something unprecedented was about to happen. "Before we begin," Victoria started, her voice honey-sweet, "I have some concerns about recent company decisions that need to be addressed." Alex remained standing. "You're right, Victoria. We do need to address some concerns." He nodded to his assistant, who began distributing thick folders to each board member. "But not the ones you're thinking of." The folders contained 30 years of evidence, discriminatory hiring practices, buried innovations, financial misconduct, and the truth about Alex's accident. As the board members flipped through the pages, their expressions ranged from shock to outrage. "This is absurd," James cut in, his confident facade cracking. "These are clearly fabricated. Like the brake lines on my car." Alex's voice was quiet but carried across the room. "Or the documents you used to destroy Dr. Washington's father 30 years ago." Victoria's face had gone pale. "You're choosing to believe these accusations over your own family?" "No, Victoria. I'm choosing truth over lies, progress over prejudice." Alex moved to the front of the room, Maya joining him. "Dr. Washington's research facility isn't just about medical breakthroughs. It's about breaking down the barriers our father built. The same barriers that almost cost me my life." One of the older board members spoke up. "Mr. Sterling, these allegations about your father are all true," Alex finished. "And there's more." He played the security footage from Maya's lab, showing James directing the break-in. The board watched in stunned silence as the evidence mounted. Victoria stood abruptly. "You have no idea what you're doing. This company has a legacy." "A legacy of exclusion." Maya stepped forward. "Of crushing innovation that could help people just because it came from someone who looked like me." "You don't belong here," Victoria snapped, losing her composure. "You're just like your father, trying to change things that don't need changing." "That's enough." Alex's voice thundered through the room. "Maya's father was right. Our father was wrong. And you, Victoria, you've become exactly what our grandfather molded you to be. Someone so afraid of change that you'd rather destroy lives than see the world evolve." James tried one last desperate move. "The shareholders will never accept this. Think about the stock price." "I already have." Alex clicked a remote, bringing up a presentation. Maya's research has attracted interest from major medical institutions worldwide. The patents alone are worth more than what you've embezzled over the past 5 years, James. The board members were now openly discussing among themselves. Maya's groundbreaking work, combined with the evidence of corruption, painted a clear picture of which side represented the company's future. "I move for an immediate vote," one member announced, "on both the removal of current management and the proposed reorganization." Victoria stood, gathering her things with shaking hands. "You'll regret this, Alex. Some things are meant to stay the way they are." "No, Victoria, some things are meant to get better." He watched his sister leave, James trailing behind her like a shadow. That's what progress looks like. The vote was unanimous. By sunset, Sterling Enterprises had a new board, a new direction, and a renewed commitment to innovation and inclusion. But the victory felt bittersweet as Alex watched his sister's car pull away from the building for the last time. Back at the estate that evening, Maya found Alex in their father's old study. He was holding the family photograph taken at his college graduation, the last time they'd all been together. "I keep wondering," he said softly, "if there was another way." Maya wrapped her arms around him from behind. "You did what your father couldn't. You chose to make things right, no matter the cost." "The press will be brutal tomorrow," he warned. "This kind of change, it makes people uncomfortable." "Good," Maya smiled. Comfort never changed the world. They spent the night planning the next phase, expanding Maya's research facilities, establishing scholarships for underrepresented medical students, creating partnerships with community health centers. The kind of changes her father had dreamed of, now finally becoming reality. "You know," Alex said as they watched the stars come out from the garden, "when you saved me on that mountain, you didn't just save my life, you saved my soul." Maya squeezed his hand. "And you helped me fulfill my father's legacy. Some things are worth fighting for." A text message lit up Maya's phone. The trial results from her latest research project had come in. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, they had this moment. They had made their stand, chosen their path, and proved that love could be stronger than legacy. What they didn't see was Victoria in her penthouse across town, making calls to old family friends. "It's not over," she whispered into the phone. Some legacies refused to die quietly. The war for the soul of Sterling Enterprises was won, but the battle for hearts and minds was just beginning. Yet Maya and Alex knew that together they could face whatever came next. After all, they had something their opponents would never understand: the courage to change. The grand auditorium of the Medical Research Center buzzed with anticipation. Hundreds of healthcare professionals, investors, and media representatives filled the seats. Maya stood backstage, reviewing her presentation one last time. 3 years of research, countless late nights, and unwavering determination had led to this moment. "Your father would be proud," Alex said softly, approaching with 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one, their fingers brushing in a familiar gesture of comfort. "Actually, he'd be more than proud. He'd be amazed." Maya smiled, thinking of the framed photo now hanging in her office, her father in his white coat, young and hopeful. "I wish you could see this. We're finally making his dream real." The past 6 months have been a whirlwind of changes. After the board meeting that exposed decades of corruption, Sterling Enterprises had transformed. Alex's public stance against discrimination had inspired other companies to examine their own practices. The story of the billionaire and the doctor who saved him had become something larger than themselves. But not everyone celebrated their success. Victoria had launched a media campaign questioning the company's new direction. Today, she sat in the front row, her expression unreadable, watching as her brother's company ventured into territory their father would never have approved of. Maya stepped onto the stage, the lights bright and warm. 3 years ago, she began, "A car accident on a mountain road changed my life. But today isn't about that accident. It's about what happens when we break down barriers and let innovation flourish." The presentation screen came alive with data showing the results of clinical trials that had exceeded even their most optimistic projections. Maya's medical research program hadn't just succeeded, it had revolutionized treatment protocols for underserved communities. By making advanced healthcare accessible to everyone, Maya continued, her voice strong and clear, "We're not just saving lives. We're changing the very fabric of medical care." In the audience, Victoria shifted uncomfortably as the room erupted in applause. She watched as administrators from several major hospitals stood up, announcing their partnerships with the program. Everything she had fought against was becoming reality. Alex joined Maya on stage for the Q&A session. As they handled questions together, their natural chemistry and shared vision was obvious to everyone. Here were two people who had turned personal challenges into systemic change. Then came the moment they'd been waiting for. James Marshall was led into the auditorium by federal agents, his corporate crimes finally catching up with him. The evidence Alex and Maya had uncovered had led to a broader investigation, exposing corruption that went far beyond Sterling Enterprises. Victoria stood up abruptly, her face pale as she watched her former ally in handcuffs. But instead of leaving, she stayed, watching as her brother and Maya outlined their vision for the future. After the presentation, in a quiet moment backstage, Victoria approached them. Her hands trembled slightly as she held out an old leather portfolio. "I found this in Father's study," she said softly. "It's his private journal. She paused, struggling with the words. "He wrote about Dr. Washington, your father, about his regrets." Maya took the journal carefully, and Victoria continued, "I've been wrong. About so many things. Watching you two today, seeing what you've built." She looked directly at Maya for the first time. "I understand now what Father never could. Change isn't something to fear." Alex reached for his sister's hand. It's never too late to choose a different path. The reconciliation wouldn't happen overnight, but it was a start. As news of the presentation spread, more companies reached out, wanting to be part of the change. The Sterling Foundation established a scholarship program in Dr. Washington's name, supporting minority medical students who shared his vision of accessible healthcare. That evening, Alex and Maya stood in the garden of their home, the same estate where their story had begun. The mountain view remained as beautiful as ever, but everything else had changed. "Do you ever think about that night?" Maya asked, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of hope. "When you crashed on that mountain?" Alex pulled her close. "I think about how sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead us to the best ones. How love can heal more than just broken bones." Maya smiled, touching the small bump of her pregnancy. Their secret for just a little while longer. And how two people from different worlds can build something beautiful together. Inside, they could hear Victoria chatting with their house staff, her laughter something new and genuine. The sound of healing, of family bonds being rebuilt. "You know what the best part is?" Alex said, looking at the woman who had saved him in more ways than one. "We're just getting started." Maya leaned into him, thinking of all the lives they would touch, all the barriers they would break. Their love story had become something bigger, a beacon of hope, a catalyst for change. A reminder that sometimes the heart sees what privilege and prejudice blind us to. As the stars began to appear above the mountains, they held each other close, knowing that their greatest adventure was still unfolding. They had transformed not just their own lives, but created ripples of change that would touch generations to come. Sometimes love does more than heal, it transforms. And in that transformation, it creates something new, something better, something that can change everything.